Matthew Buckley Smith, and you are listening to SLEERICKETS, a podcast about poetry and other intractable problems. This week, I am joined by Alexis Sears, author of Out of Order, and Joanna Pearson, my wife, author of 5 books, including the forthcoming novel Bright and Tender Dark, available very soon from Bloomsbury. This is actually the public debut of Joanna and Alexis's intense social media fueled friendship. They joined me this week to talk about an article by Mary Gateskill that came out in a recent issue of The New Yorker. It's called The Friendship Challenge, and it's a little bit of memoir and a little bit of gender theory, I guess. It was strange and interesting, as her writing tends to be, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation about it. I hope you do as well. Stick around at the end of the episode for a preview of the latest from The Secret Show. And right now, here's my conversation with Alexis and Joanna.
So tell me what you're doing. So you're on spring break?
I am.
Wait, are you Wait, I think Matthew made me think you were tutoring, but then I
I'm
was like,
substitute teaching. It is great because you get paid to do nothing, but it's horrible because you get paid to do nothing. You know what I mean? You just sit there and decay, but you get to eavesdrop on kids. Sometimes that's fun.
that's amazing. No, I've known several writers lately who've been substitute teaching, and you can just like take it or deny it. You can take whatever.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And the money is like shockingly good.
Really?
Yeah.
That's gotta be only because you're in California.
That's what I think too. I've heard in other states it's like one like fraction of what it is here.
That's fantastic. So can you just can you do that and then also give yourself writing days? Can you just like take
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah. And also it's so easy. Like I said, that all you do is just take roll. So in a perfect world, I would be writing while I was there, but I don't know. There's something about like when you're supposed to be writing that you just can't do it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, like 100% know what you mean. It's like, I mean, it's like when you have a long layover in an airport and you've got a computer. Like, have I ever written when I'm stuck in an airport for a long time? No, because I don't know. It's like you feel pent up or trapped or something. I was going to ask you other questions, but I think Matthew's recording all of this. So I feel like certain things I can't.
Oh no, Matthew is ruining everything. We can't talk about anything scandalous.
I'm waiting for Mary Gateskill, but I was going to ask about like the crush report, etc. And I was like,
What have I told you about that?
Well,
about
there was the blast from the past, but then it turned out the blast from the past was like a secret Republican or something. Like what like
Oh, I didn't tell you about the the pornographic Instagram stuff.
You did tell me about that. He also like it was the same guy though. Like he's like a corporate guy with a pornographic Instagram.
Yeah. What?
Set on public.
Yeah, so he's not doing anything porn related, but all the accounts are like really like bizarre. I'm just gonna say it, Matthew, you can leave it or not. Just like real like really like massive fake boobs, like basketballs. Like that's his thing.
I think this is a generational thing because men my age are plausibly on Instagram or plausibly don't know how to operate Instagram.
Mhm.
I just think like we were just like of a time of, wagon caravans and whatnot. But my sister, who's 10 years younger, she's constantly telling me about, she'll like, oh, this guy I know, I looked at his Instagram and he follows all these women with fake breasts. And I was like, I don't even think fake breasts were cool in my era. Like, I feel like they like, or maybe I don't know, maybe I hung out with like deeply nerdy people who didn't quite get onto the internet fast enough. Oh, there's Matthew.
I think you're right. Matthew, you came at a great time.
Yeah.
No, Joanna, you're right. It was in it. I don't even think I think right now it's all over the top.
Yeah,
Everything.
I think there was like a generational swing where it was, because I don't think, and I also think probably I was insulated by my nerdery, which we're going to segue with that into this Mary Gateskill article, which I don't know about y'all. Like the first time I read it, I love Mary Gateskill. So if any of this gets back to Mary Gateskill, who I admire and who I'm kind of intimidated by, like, I just want to go on the record. It's like, I am your friend and not your enemy, Mary Gateskill. Whatever I say, whatever comments I make, I love you. Don't steal my clothes. don't don't come after me. But I will say the thing is, like when I came back to this, it was weirder and weirder the second and third times I looked at it. Like the first time I read it, I was like, oh, nice article. And the second or third time I was like, this was so much weirder than I first realized. That's my opening gambit.
All right. Alexis, initial impression.
I had the same reaction you did. I read it a couple times. The first time I'm flipping through it, I had a bunch of things underlined, blah, 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 relatable, blah, blah, blah. To me, what was weird, and I know this isn't the main focus, but I do think it's relevant. What was up with Mary's parents? Like, oh, she's whack. We're sending her to a boarding school.
That's part of what is strange about this
Yeah.
article is that her very nonchalant delivery of things that like she's such a competent writer and she has such a sure hand. It's like you're reading along and when she delivers it nonchalantly the first time you're like, oh right. So then my parents declared me a ward of the state so I could get a scholarship. And then I saw her and it turned out she was more mad than I thought about that. Like everything about it, there's so many things that she delivers with incredible nonchalance that are so bizarre, but it's like you don't realize how bizarre they are until you come back a second time around. I agree completely.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. What she says, I can't find the precise quote, but she says, that's when my parents had me committed to an asylum and I ran away from home.
Yes, and she's just like one sentence, throwaway line. Like, oh yeah, after that, that's when my parents got. I was like, what was going on,
Yeah.
Mary Gateskill? This is why you write these amazing, genius, utterly dark and strange stories. But like, no, well, and even to go back to the very beginning, the whole beginning, I went back and I was like, her whole opening thing is like, I don't really know how competitive I am. It's hard
Mm.
for me to imagine. I don't think I've ever had a competitive female friendship. Maybe I would. Oh, yeah. But then I remembered this whole incredibly competitive scenario. Like, even that was delivered so strangely in such an interesting way.
The whole thing is super like freakishly, and I think some you like mostly effectively, it's so matter of fact. But that intro, I agree with you because it's such a, I mean, she still thinks about
Do,
this
do you want
friend
to do you
all
want
the
to read
time.
it for us, Alexis?
Yeah. First, first paragraph.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't really know how competitive I am by nature because if you can't consciously acknowledge something, you can't see where you are in relation to it. I wrote this sentence to an acquaintance with whom I was having a long email exchange about Elena Ferrante's novel, My Brilliant Friend, which follows the early phase of an intense, lifelong, and highly competitive relationship between two Neapolitan girls in post-war Italy. Like a lot of things one dashes off in emails, the sentence isn't strictly true. I can acknowledge when I'm competitive, particularly in a professional situation, but the acknowledgement is muffled, half suppressed. The competitiveness always takes me by surprise, coming, for example, in the form of a sudden sneaky urge to best someone in a minor contest that means very little. Upon, quote, winning, in such situations, I feel a satisfaction that embarrasses me or sometimes remorse. Upon losing, a petty bitterness that is also embarrassing. Either way, I generally don't let myself experience the feelings for long.
Does that sound true to your own experience? Like, not of Mary Gateskill, but your own experience of your like? Is that how you generally feel about competition, or does I have not read the Elena Ferrante novel, but do you feel the same kind of indifference largely to competition? Except for like when you like casually something comes up and then you absolutely crush the person who happened by you by chance, and then you forget about it and move on.
Right. Yeah, well, I think growing up when I was super like neurotic about school and grades and this and that, was more open, like, yes, I'm competitive. But then when I became an adult, I said something about how I'm not really all that competitive. And this person I was talking to, he was like, yes, you are. And I think maybe I just am without realizing it. I don't know. I
Do you
mean,
think that
I
means you're
started
competitive,
like,
but you always win?
No,
oh,
here's my theory, Alexis, and I'm going to test it out on you and you can see. I think that my theory is that there is a division between ambitious and competitive, but sometimes people conflate them and sort of use them as synonyms when I actually don't think they are. And I think probably, Alexis, I'm going to go out on a limb because you're a remarkable person. I'm going to say, like, maybe you're ambitious, but that your friend was conflating ambitious with competitive. Because I think, like, to me, I read this and I think Mary Gateskill is competitive AF, as the youth say.
Yes.
So competitive. I think it's hilarious that she's like, oh, it's hard for me to fathom. I don't even think it's because to me, it's in that form of like her wanting to best other people. I think that's the distinction, is that the competitiveness is something about like edging out another person and sort of taking this little embarrassing satisfaction when like you best them, where I think like ambitiousness is more self-driven and maybe allow like doesn't necessarily require another person's like failure or discomfort. That would be my distinction.
I think you're absolutely onto something. Also, I think part of that has to do with just, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm an adult, but I don't feel like I have as many situations in which I would be competitive. Like, I'm not wondering if the girl next to me got a higher score on a math test than I did. You know what I mean? Like, who would I be competing with right now?
Wait a minute. You're a poet. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's insanely like you don't think about other, like you don't like find that somebody else has appeared in the table of contents of some magazine and you're like, that motherfucker. Like, why am I not it? Like, you don't have those feelings at all?
For me, it's not competition. It's just a really I'm afraid to say elitism, but elitism. Like sometimes I'll just read this poem and I'm like, this is bad. Why is this
Yeah,
here?
a
Yeah.
hundred, 100%. Well, and I think like I think there can be that feeling. I think like why is this overhyped? But I think that you can have now I don't remember the distinction people try and draw between envy and jealousy, but I think envy, you can have a kind of professional envy and you can look at something and be like, "Oh, I would love to have that. I would love to be in that table of contents." And you can even have the kind of like, "Oh God, why did they put that in there? That doesn't feel like it's got the merit to deserve it." But like there's room for other people in the table of contents. I think it doesn't necessarily require the squashing. It's like
I,
because like this to me, what it's about is like it's about like there's not room for two of them. Like you have to sort of squash the other person, like take their clothes.
I almost wonder if that, because you're talking about envy, which is when you covet something that you don't have, or jealousy is when you covet something you do have, and you don't want, like, you're jealous usually of a person because that person is getting attention from someone who is close to you, right? Like Echo is jealous of you if you get too close to me. Our dog Echo is very jealous.
Oh.
Yeah.
Loves math. She's
But I think
obsessed.
your distinction in envy is not a bad one, but I think it may indicate sort of where you fall on this split, right? Like if you envy the publication credit, that's competitive. If you envy the work itself, that
Hmm.
is more likely to, I think, coincide with ambition. Does that make sense? I mean, they're
Yeah, I
both
mean,
forms of competition, but it feels like there is a little bit of an important distinction there.
I think that's sort of that's a divide that makes sense in a sort of very clean and perfect world. But I think that the feeling often gets muddled. But I also think like I still think that the competition I still think competition and ambition feel different to me.
Well, right. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was also going to say I'm just curious to hear Alexis, since she's youthful and dazzling and has like I'm curious about this as like a template of female friendship, like in like that like Elena Ferrante and in Mary Gaitskill's telling, because I don't think I'm pulling a Mary Gaitskill here when I say this. Like this type of friendship interests me, but I don't think that I have theories as to why maybe I have not had exactly this type of friendship. I think I have some ways of speculating, but I don't think I've had these types of friendships.
Do you want
I'm
to
curious.
summarize what the actual article is, what the story is between these two friends? There's a story about a friendship. Maybe Alexis, do you want to start? Maybe y'all can tag team a little bit,
Sure, yeah.
just so people know what we're talking about if they haven't read it themselves.
Matthew, you start.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So in this story, Mary Gateskill makes friends with a girl, when she was a child. She makes friends with this girl she calls Sandrine. And Mary Gateskill is from a family, they don't have fancy clothes. She doesn't think of herself as being particularly attractive. She is kind of shocked, along with her mother, by when she gets mocked for her failure to adhere to fashion standards. And the parents' goal seems to be mostly just to dress and present and manage their children in such a way as to cause minimal fuss. But then she makes friends with this girl over the summer who's funny, and they're able to kind of conspire and share confidences. And then on the first day of school, this girl, I want to find the description of it because it's really striking. Sandrine comes dressed in a way that seizes the attention of the classmates. Where's the and unlike you two, I've read this only once. Oh yeah, okay.
You remember everything.
Yeah, this sense of the possible became in my imagination epitomized by Sandrine's crazily romantic clothes, some of which were, to my astonishment, made for her by her mother: a miniskirt with layers of multi-textured fabric, lacy low-cut blouses with butterfly sleeves, a blue velvet empire waist dress bejeweled with rhinestones at the neckline, thigh-high platform boots, a maxi trench coat, all worn with the false eyelashes and the fall of fake hair. The thing that it seems like, I mean, by my lights, makes a big difference here is that she is both very beautiful. She is genuinely beautiful, and she has really, really great clothes that really suit her. And so it's not just like spending time around high school students when I was teaching in high school, I was sort of taken aback by how much kids are persuaded by presentation. And so it would not necessarily be somebody who's sort of fundamentally most beautiful who would be the queen bee. It would be somebody who had the best clothes, the best makeup, the best presentation, who sort of carried herself in such a way as to suggest that she was superior. Sandrine seems to have it all, and it's undeniable to those around her.
She also doesn't have, I mean, when I was growing up, there was kind of the cool, acceptable uniform. If your parents could drive you to Charlotte and get you the Abercrombie and Fitch clothes or whatever. Right. And it was very, very scary to deviate from that. So you had to have a lot of aplomb, or you had to have a lot of something to come in. I mean, she sounds like she honestly sounds like Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean / Dolly Parton. Like this outfit sounds over the top, but she clearly has the beauty and the poise and the like conviction of self to pull off kind of like bonkers sounding outfits, honestly.
She doesn't behave at all like the other popular girls or the other, and so, and she, as Mary Gateskill says, she's not, she carries herself in a way that is that's striking and even suggestive. She had courage. I never saw her being ridiculed or put down in the way that other unusually attractive and overtly sexual girls were. It was as if she occupied her own category that no one knew how to respond to.
I don't want to get all like, I don't know if this is Freudian or what, because I hate when I say something and a therapist is like, well, let's tie it back into your childhood. But I do think it's relevant, the fact that her mom makes these clothes for her, right? These over the top, like somewhat suggestive sounding clothes,
right, the revealing clothes,
the thigh high that and the mini this. Like, meanwhile, Mary Gateskill's parents are just like, totally pretending that it's almost a bad thing to want to, kind of explore like your femininity or your fashion or any of that. They're like, oh, like basically implying that it's frivolous. So if Sandrine has this like really dope, chill mom who's making her these sexy clothes, then to me, it also sort of makes sense that she's not acting totally crazy or bitchy at school, right?
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Okay.
I had the same thought too about like the noting that the mother made it, and how, meanwhile, Mary Gateskill's mother's like, we're going to throw you into the hospital, and you got to wear your plain clothes. No, I think it's absolutely relevant. So the clothes are sort of symbolically charged. Like they're wild, they're revealing, they're made with love by a mother. Yeah, there's a kind of like magic object quality to them. But do y'all think, I mean, Matthew, obviously you did not grow up as a girl child, but Alexis, you did. like this kind of like inherently, how does she describe it? Like two boxers in a ring, like this kind of like
Yeah.
intimate but competitive friendship.
But
And
I take her at her word that it's not competitive at first. She says, for what struck me most about the Ferrante novel was how those feelings of intense, self-lacerating jealousy coexisted with deep love. The girls love and uphold each other like boxers resting in a moment of clinch. But that does not seem to be how it feels with Sandrine at first, at least. So that does seem only to come up later.
that was exactly the passage that I was going to. So I'm wondering, like, is that how characteristic is that of like female friendship at a certain age? Or I feel like what I witnessed, like also like sister relationships of sisters who are
Mm.
close in age.
Yeah, I had this conversation with a friend recently, so it all like this like SLEERICKETS episode, it all ties in perfectly. I think I had like one situation like this as a kid and then one as an adult. One of them, the difference like when I was a kid, it was this girl who was sort of in our group of friends in our Girl Scout troop. And the difference between that and this adult situation I'm about to get into is that I just did not like this childhood person.
Yeah.
We it was a frenemy, like there,
Right. Yeah.
just like a massive ego there. Like if she got 100% on a test, I am 100% happy with my grade with like some cocky little smirk kind of thing. I was always sort of envious because she had like this like long blonde hair and perfect teeth and blah blah blah, which when you're younger is sort of a big deal. I mean, even the guy I was telling you about, Joanna, the grocery store guy, who eventually liked me, liked her first kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but my other friend and I were talking about how, as adults, when we look back on the people who were supposedly all that, or the ones we envied or whatever, they weren't that great either.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And sort of, I realized that the reason in my life that I've envied people, the second one being a friend of mine who I sort of envied because I thought just everything in life came very easy to her. Like she wants a job, she gets one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She like meets this guy who is a wealthy Stanford grad, and he's like, "Oh, just live in my house and I'll take care of you."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just confessed to her once. I was like, I'm really jealous of you. And she was just flabbergasted. And she said, I'm jealous of you. So I realized that like my jealousy slash envy, it's never based on anything real. Like I've
Yeah.
never like, God, I wish I was as funny as this person or as thoughtful as this person. It's
Yeah.
always, oh, I wish I had this person's boyfriend or this
Yeah.
person's like teeth. You know what I mean?
Well, but even that, Alexis, is like acknowledging it sort of disarms it. Like the fact that you sort of had I mean, I think it is a kind of confidence. You had like a kind of confidence to be able to be like, oh, I'm so jealous of those things. Like to me, that sort of diffuses the potential for these kind of situations because I don't know, it sort of diffuses it by being open about it.
It,
Mm-hmm.
a pattern I have observed from the outside as a guy often among sisters, friends, sometimes in one case, like a girlfriend who had a kind of an odd relationship with her brother, even across sex, is that the pattern is often that you have a a girl who sort of takes on or inhabits the role of the smart one, while the other inhabits the role of the pretty one. Even if they're both fairly comparable in both categories, it becomes important that each have her lane, almost as a way to diffuse or avoid competition. Is that something that you've seen yourselves? Because I wonder if that was not in part what was happening with you and your friend. That I mean, it seems here Mary Gaskell doesn't quite acknowledge that, but we do learn later on that Sandrine had envy of Mary Gaskell, and it seems to be that she was sort of the smart one and Sandrine was the pretty one in their way of treating their friendship, whether or not it was true in life. Have I been correctly observing that, or
Yeah.
is that incorrect? I don't know.
No, that's definitely right.
Yeah, I think I've seen that a lot in like sister dynamics. And I see this like I feel like I less experienced it in my own sister dynamic, partly because she was so much younger. So I had two brothers in between. So
Mm.
I had a lot of my childhood when up until age 10, I didn't have my sister. And then she joined and she was just like such a baby when I was, growing up. And so I didn't experience it, but I had so many friends who had sisters close in age. And that's where I really felt that energy, which felt very different from the energy that I had with my brother. So yeah, I think Matthew, you're picking up on something that's out there, but
I'm trying to think of people I know with sisters. And in both of these situations, it's the younger one who's the, the hot one or
Yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and I don't know
Well,
why that is, but it is.
I mean, older
and
children tend to get more attention, so they often get,
she had
yeah.
sisters. Mary Gateskill like lightly alludes to it, but she was
Hmm.
brought up in a sister. I think sisters close in age creates, I mean, my theory that I'm going to throw out there that someone can debunk is that if you grow up with closer in age sisters, I think it's different if there's like a gap or if they're brothers, but if you have sisters, it sort of breeds, it's like a hothouse atmosphere that is more apt to create this attitude towards other female friends and a need to sort of like figure out like what your role is, the one girl who she was sort of my frenemy when I was a little kid. And I say frenemy, like I was never in competition with her. It was very much a thing where she had two sisters who were close in age and they were very knowing and very sassy and like way more sophisticated. And I just loved her and like wanted to hang out with her. And she would always kind of sometimes deign to be my friend and sometimes say mean things to me and tell me I was a nerd or whatever. But like I was never in competition with her, but I think that was how she was operating in the world with other people. And so she would say things like when we were in third grade, just stuff that wouldn't have occurred to me, where she'd be like, well, you know, boys won't like you if you keep wearing pigtails and knee socks, which like my mom had dressed me in for third grade.
What do you think motivated her to say that? Was
No,
she
but
just giving you honest advice? Or was she?
well, this is what I mean. Like she, like looking back on it, she totally had this kind of like Sandrine Mary Gateskill competitive energy because she would like things that would never have occurred to me to say. This is where I'm like, I would say like I'm ambitious, but I don't identify as being competitive because it's like I would always be so bewildered that she was kind of putting a shiv into me. Like, I don't know, she would just do these like subtle. She was also the one who would like, she would encourage me when we were very young. She would encourage me to have crushes on people. And then she would go like negotiate the crushes and like titter and laugh with the older kids and the older boys. And like now I'm looking back and it was totally an excuse for her to mingle with the cool older kids, whatever grade we were. And then she would come back and sort of like, she would stir up the crush and then come back and humiliate me with the news that so and so didn't like me back. Or she would be like, she was be like the type she'd be like, well, do you think well, I talked to him and he said you might be pretty if you weren't flat chested. This
You
is
weren't
like
wearing
middle
pigtails
school.
and knee socks.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like just like things that wouldn't have occurred to me. Like now I'm like she was so much more like sophisticated or conniving or just like worldly. Like these were things that would not have occurred to me to elicit from other boy children or to come back and like messenger to other. But she was very quickly in middle school our paths diverged and she became a quote unquote popular girl. And then I stopped having such a friendship. But like it took me a long time to realize the competition that she sort of was looking at the world, I think, in this kind of like competitive way that sort of like bewildered me.
And it sounds like she was threatened by you. And I know that might sound because you're like, oh, I was a nerd, blah, blah, blah. But it sounds as if even the way she delivers this so-called, sage wisdom, like boys won't like you if you dress like this. Is that honest, unsolicited advice? No. Like there was a motive.
I think she now like looking back, I don't think I can honestly say with no false modesty, I don't think she was ever threatened by me, but I do think that like seeing she was someone who was always scoring points and like tittering and laughing and sort of asserting her dominance, maybe I think is maybe more what I would see. But like she was the only one who I really experience that with, and then I didn't have other, then I very much gravitated towards other girls slash women who were not like that. So like I really haven't had the Sandrine friendships.
There's another sort of female friendship trope that Gaskell alludes to without really getting into, which she talks about all the ways in which Sandrine was more impressive than she was in high school. She says some people would probably suggest that Sandrine preferred that because the contrast between us made her appear more powerful. Whether or not powerful is quite the right word, she rejects that explanation, and it does seem later as if Sandrine does have kind of reason to envy Gateskill, but it called to mind a term that boys used to use in school in observing certain female friendships, where we would identify usually one of two girls, sometimes one of a group, as the footstool. Is this a trope that's familiar to y'all? I'm curious.
Well, you got to describe what the footstool is.
Well, the observation, and God only knows, but the observation was that, and this is not my original observation, just something that was kind of passed on to me as received wisdom, was that particularly girls who are aiming to present themselves as the pretty one, as somebody to be admired, will often pair themselves with someone who is definitely outside the realm of mainline approval, like somebody who's distinct. Often it would have like a class element, a race element. There'd be that somebody who is sort of distinctly not going to be competition, and who provided a pleasing contrast, so that what we were observing was the appearance that
the queen bee and her helpers. That's what you're describing, right?
Well, but see, this is a little bit different, because it wasn't like one versus many, because there was often like the ringleader girl, but then a group of like mean girls would have a footstool, one, or you'd have sort of these dyads where it'd be a popular pretty girl, and then a strikingly, again, like in retrospect, like not even necessarily somebody who was less attractive, somebody who just sort of didn't tick the right boxes, didn't present in the right way, would otherwise have been relegated to, the unwashed masses with the rest of us, but who sort of took privilege from being able to accompany this queen bee.
She's like a handmaid. Yeah.
The handmaid, but also like it was important that she show face too, that she's a contrast, right? So that it was the contempt of the one for the other that we were remarking, I think.
Growing up, people called that the duff. Have you heard that term?
What's that term mean?
It was like there was a movie with that name, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was a movie. It was the same concept, the duff. Notice how the actress who's supposedly the duff is also very pretty, but it's the designated ugly fat friend.
Okay.
Yeah, the same kind of idea, like, here's the contrast. We'll throw this quote duff into the mix so the rest of you can appear prettier or cooler or whatever in contrast. There's that like stereotype of like the duff is the one taking the photo while, the pretty girls are like frolicking on the beach kind of thing.
Oh, right. Yes.
Yeah.
I will say this kind of tracks with like the popular girl culture of my high school. I don't know. Did you grow up in California, Alexis? Where did you grow up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, was that the high school dynamic? Like, I'm trying to like picture, like, I feel like this is accurate to my childhood.
So we had two high schools that were strikingly different. One of them, the one I went, was Peninsula High School, and that one was just all about academics. It was like more than half of people were Asian, and everybody was a SAT prep. Everybody was, I hate to sound like I'm stereotyping, but I'm just saying facts. Everybody was playing their violins at 3 a.m. You know what I mean? But then the other high school, PV, Palos Verdes High School, that's what it is. It's just frankly, most people had just a disgusting amount of wealth. I mean, people were heirs to this and, billionaires of that. And everybody was like, because even if you do not have the money, if you come from a family of money, kind of like what Matthew was saying about presentation and how you dress and stuff, you're going to look a certain way. And for everybody else, there will be pressure to sort of keep up with that. So it was all about, glamour and this and that. And this is shocking. But after one of the girls graduated, she got a boob job, and guess who did it? Guess who the plastic surgeon was?
The
I don't
plastic.
know of
dad.
any plastic.
What? Her dad?
Her
What?
dad. Her dad did
Oh
it.
no! What?
Yeah.
No, Alexis,
Yep.
that's so gross.
Mhm.
That's so messed up.
I mean,
This is going to be our
gross,
most
but
popular
also
episode yet.
like setting aside like the weirdness of it.
You
Like,
shouldn't
why
do
would you want your child to have a
you
boob? Like what?
also like you first of all, you shouldn't do surgery on any family member
Right? Yeah.
unless you're on a desert island and they need their appendix out. Second
Right.
of all, that is disgusting. Can you imagine you're being like, oh, do you like my new fake
Yeah.
oh my dad what ah!
Yeah, right. Whose idea was that even? I mean, how do you even bring that up at dinner? Like,
That is
Why,
oh wow.
why,
Wow.
why would you like? How would you not try to talk your daughter out of like? I mean, people get plastic surgery for a variety of reasons, some of which are pretty meaningful, but like that as a person just out of high school, just like,
Wow.
good God, what?
Wait, so Alexis, so you were at the SAT violin high school.
mhm.
I mean, I imagine that, see, because this is where like I kind of had neither of those. I mean, you and Matthew both had very different high school experiences from me. Like mine was not quite either of those. It was sort of like a small town North Carolina public high school experience, which still had its own whatever hierarchy. But so were people trying out to get you? Because I can imagine that like you were bright, you were smart, you were cool.
Mhm.
Like were there like people being like, why are you wearing knee socks? Not that you're wearing knee socks, but you know.
That all came to a head my senior year of high school. It's possible that it was going on the first 3 years and I just wasn't aware of it. But when everyone started getting or not getting into college, that
Yeah.
became an issue. And people would just, someone openly said to me once, this is hilarious. Johns Hopkins, congratulations. Like, I'm sure affirmative action didn't hurt you, or, and it was always,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
they would always throw that around. I mean, I know, I had a classmate who got into every Ivy except Brown. And she was Nigerian. So of course, doesn't matter. Her perfect SAT doesn't matter. Her being
Right?
3 years
Yeah.
ahead in math doesn't matter. It's got to be because she's Black,
Yeah.
right? So academically, there was that culture of competition, definitely.
But it was less. I mean, because I wonder about that with our own girls, depending on how things shake out with the various public schools that they're districted for. I'm curious, do you think being among the nerds made like eliminated certain standard high school?
Because it blows Mary Gaitskill's theory where she's like, men compete about what they do, women
Right.
compete about what they are, which like in that high school, which is like very academically rigorous, people are, well, they're kind of competing about what they do, but then when they want to try and take somebody down, they try to like undermine what their actual accomplishments have been. So, but it does.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I also think I mean, what you do and who you are, don't those things sort of intertwine anyway? And I think I underlined that at one point. But the idea that like, men only care about, making money and this and that and what they do, and then women, it's all about like who's thin and who's this and who's that.
Right.
I think that might be kind of overly simplistic.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah. I don't think it's like universally true. You don't think there's any truth to it as a
do you know?
tendency?
Here's what I think, and I'm afraid that Mary Gates. I love you, Mary Gates. I love your
We
fiction.
love you, Barry.
It's so
not going
good.
to come for you.
No, she is. She is, because I'm going to say something that I feel like might be true. I love Mary Gateskill. I so admire her strange dark work, and I feel kind of simpatico with it. But I have this feeling about her, and this essay did not dissuade me of this feeling. I had this feeling about her that she might be one of those women who is hard for other women to be friends with. Like I feel like that like there is there is a distinct type of woman who somehow, and I know the person that she's writing to that we know in the beginning, the friend, he happens to be a man, interesting enough.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, like there's something kind of like prickly about her that I detect, and a little bit like charged with competitive energy that makes me wonder about like like how she is within female friendships. Because I say this as someone where I feel like, for reasons I could speculate about and get into, I don't think historically, and I'm not trying to put myself down. I think I've done plenty of accomplishments or whatever, but I don't think that I am a person who in my life has like provoked strong feelings of like female
Mm.
enmity and like competition and animosity. And I could easily speculate why, but I think like my energy tends to be disarming, and I tend to like love my female friends. But I do think that there is a type of woman who just like comes in with a different energy. And I'm sure there's a similar sweeping generalization I could make about men too, but I'm not going to make it right now.
What is that energy? I mean, I guess I'm curious, like
I
if
think
there's a
it's,
certain
I
kind of
think
woman who doesn't make good friends with
Well,
women, what is that?
I think it might have to do with this. I mean, I know she's like, oh, I'm not even aware that I think it might have to do with that fundamental competitive energy where there's constantly a sort of assessing yourself against the other. Like you're sort of like a animal on the Serengeti, like assessing the other animal. I think that like I think it is the competitive energy. Like I think it is
Okay.
fundamentally the Sandrine thing where like rather than sort of feeling like
The Sandrine thing, how? Like, you think Sandrine was an
well,
example of this,
I think
or?
like one way of going about it would be like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud and I feel so like my stock is kind of risen because I have such a cool, beautiful, amazing friend, which is sort of the way that I tend to feel. Like if I like someone and I think my friend is like cool and amazing and beautiful, I sort of like take pride and sort of feel like I almost like give a point to myself. Like I don't feel it like that is detracting from me. If anything, I feel like wow, what a how cool that I am affiliated with this person.
Yep, yep. And I think I said that drunkenly on my 21st birthday, though I don't remember very much of that night. But I do remember talking to someone and like pointing at my friends and being like, look how cool these people are. Like,
Yeah,
isn't it great that my friends are so fun and beautiful and smart and they're friends with
yeah.
me? Especially when I don't know if you've read all the studies about how people are supposedly like usually of equal attractiveness as their friends. Have you heard about that?
I haven't heard of it, but I believe I've heard of it with like pairing. It kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense. Yeah. I mean, I want to say that because I feel like I have a lot of beautiful, wonderful
Mhm.
friends. So, yeah.
Something I've been chewing over, and I definitely don't have a complete thought on it, but it has occurred to me recently that insecurity can at times yield insight, right? Like, for example, if you're the kid who goes to the rich school, but you have a lot less money than everyone else, you're going to perceive certain things that your classmates simply won't notice at all. Like, it just won't occur to them, and you'll kind of be tuned into some of these things. But then there are also cases where insecurity distorts perception, and confidence is what yields greater insight, right? Because people who are insecure famously will sort of warp the intentions of those around them in their interpretations.
Yeah.
I wonder a little bit in this case how much it might matter, like how much your sense of whether you are whether you're sort of a Mary Gateskill who puts off other women, or you're somebody who's able to celebrate those. Like, I wonder how much of this philosophy or this effect on other people is going to derive from your own relative standing, right? Like, Mary Gateskill she was maybe not a Sandrine, but she's a good looking woman who's very successful from a pretty young age with her writing, very impressive, consistently successful and impressive across her career. Do you think that she would be off putting in the same way if she had the same personality, but was less enviable?
Well, she says something about that in the end, right? Where she talks about sort of the isolation that she didn't appreciate in Sandrine and the way that like she has felt lonely when she was the recipient of other people's envy.
Yeah.
I don't remember that part is.
I mean,
Uh,
including so we should actually say that. So she has this friendship with Sandrine. They are. I mean, it does seem like there was not envy really for a long stretch of time. Though Gateskill's mother really disliked Sandrine and sort of insulted her in ways that seemed maybe disingenuous. Ultimately, Gateskill gets sent off to a boarding school, and just before going, she begs Sandrine to lend her some clothes to wear because she has so many just gorgeous clothes, and Gateskill's clothes are all dull and boring. Sandrine says no, and then Gateskill steals a bunch of the clothes anyway and hides them in her room, but isn't able to bring them, and so it eventually comes to light, and they're returned, and there's a little bit of a dust up, but seemingly Sandrine just sort of reflexively forgives her. Only when she comes back home, it turns out maybe she had not quite forgiven her. And there's this other thing that happens where Gateskill, when she was away at boarding school, she fell in with the hippie kid. She has a good description of this here. Remarkably, I found myself accepted into a clique of comparatively sophisticated hippie kids who were able to smoke pot, drop acid, meditate obsessively on Hindu religious texts, and talk about the mystery of existence versus the weirdness of society late into the night while keeping up with their classwork. They'd had practice. The sense of belonging was intoxicating to me, even if it was superficial, but I lacked the sense to realize that it was superficial. She, while joining this group, quickly flunks out of school, is sent home, and she appears back home.
She was making out with a boy. She's like very.
Yeah. She's making out a boy. She says her studies do suffer, but she's not able to carry it off the way that the rich kids who'd been there doing it for a while were. She comes home in her new hippie garb. She basically bought clothes rather than using the money that she was supposed to spend on school supplies. She comes home in this sort of new presentation, and Sandrine is furious with her. It was a shock when on my arrival back home, she exploded in anger and disappointment at me. I was no longer the person she knew. My inexplicable transformation into a weird hippie thing seemed so crazy or so fake, and either way, so destructive that she could no longer be my friend. She kind of takes that at face value and moves on. How did that strike you two? I'm curious, because I was a little bit puzzled by it. That what she yells at her about is not, hey, you stole my clothes. It's, look at you dressed up this way. What a phony you are. I can't be friends with you anymore. How did that land?
She's got the parenthetical that says her other friend also does note that she was mad about the clothes too, and never.
Yeah. She hadn't quite forgiven. But so, do you think that was merely an excuse? Then it was just the readiest possible opportunity she had to reject her, or do you think there was something else there?
Well, what's interesting about this, and this is, because at times I was reading this and I was skeptical when Mary was saying, oh, Sandrine is so great and she doesn't seem aware of, how beautiful she is and this and that. And I was sort of reading it going, but are we sure though? But when we got to this part, I thought like, oh, Mary was right. Because for a lot of people, especially teenage girls who are angry, it would have been really easy to go for the jugular, right? Like, you stole my clothes because you're a loser, or you this, or you're not popular like me, blah, blah, blah. But she didn't. And her criticisms and her anger had to do with her, her being, quote, fake. And I think that is because, to me, Mary represented what it meant to be genuine, right? Because Sandrine knew that she was surrounded by, like, she must have known on some level that the power she had and the attention wasn't based on anything real necessarily, right? It was largely about her clothes and her beauty and this and that. And I think that's why she was so hurt by Mary's betrayal. That's what I got from it. Because I sort of read it as like an, oh, not you too kind of thing. Like, oh, you're just as fake and shallow as everybody else I deal with. That's what I.
Yeah, that read makes sense, because the thing that she's envious the whole time is the literary talent coupons, and Mary's, coolly dead on wit. It's not something that's reducible to a presentation. And so it's like, so the whole thing is like just like disappointment.
But it does seem, I mean, and we don't know, there's plenty that maybe she's leaving out about that first encounter when they ran back, when they saw each other again. But I was a little bit puzzled by Sandrine's decision to reject her because of her clothes. I mean, the suggestion is that it's her appearance and not something she says or does that causes the rejection. Like that felt funny to me because it seemed like, like to me, that suggested that like Gateskill was wearing dull, boring clothes before. Sundrine wouldn't even lend her clothes, and then was mad when she sort of came up with her own new, I mean, conformist in a different way style. But it was, in a way, it seemed like, oh, I wanted you to be wearing the same old dumpy clothes you were always wearing. Like that it doesn't seem to be anything she said.
That's interesting. That's very interesting and sort of makes me want to change my mind and do a total 180 about what I
Okay.
said just now about it's like I was like, oh, Sandrine, I don't know if she was aware of her beauty. Now that you're mentioning that, because that was something that I didn't really consider. Why does, Sandrine have a monopoly on wearing interesting or out there
Yeah.
clothes? But Mary gets back and, oh, I don't like you dressing that way. I don't know. What do you think that's about? Do you think maybe there was an element of like, okay, now Mary is cool and could be seen as competition?
Or she's a less appealing accessory. Like it won't be cool to hang out with her in the way that it was. Like even if Sandrine is still, more beautiful or more stylish, it doesn't it's almost like a betrayal. Like it's a betrayal of extremely shallow principles, if that makes sense. Right?
Yeah.
Like we don't
Yeah.
dress like the cool kids, but like it's so important that we not dress like the cool kids.
Right.
Which seems like I'm like the actual nonconformists or the actual sort of interesting original people I knew in school were often people who didn't necessarily. I mean, like Ryan, that was college, but like he looked like a frat boy when I met him. Like he wore a frat boy uniform in a very standard, boring like khakis or like light jeans and a polo shirt and a white baseball cap and sneakers. Like like but he was like his originality was not in his presentation, whereas here it seems like very important that it's what's signaled rather than maybe anything else.
I'm glad you're mentioning this because this is somewhat related to my next question. I really want to know what, in friendships or friend groups, like among men, is there an envious or a jealousy kind of situation ever? And what is that based on?
A great question.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there is some truth to the claim Mary Gateskill makes early on, which is that women compete over who they are, men compete over what they do. I mean, I think that's probably the cleanest way to put it. I don't, obviously it's not true across the board. There are plenty of exceptions. As a tendency, I think it has a lot of truth to it. The slight tweaks I might make are that men compete over what they accomplish and women compete over how they're perceived. Because I think like Sandrine would not have been an object of envy, would not have been somebody that Gateskill tried to compete with if she looked exactly the same, dressed exactly the same, but kids at school made fun of her. Like she might still have been a very good friend to Gateskill, but it would not have like that. I think for women, it's not in a way like as with men, like it's not enough to do it. It's you have to do it and sort of get recognized for like like you have to sort of arrive at a finished point with it. And with women, I think it's not enough to be something. You have to be perceived as that thing as well. Like
But how much of that is just like as simple as the sort of the historical cultural pressure for women and their appearance, much more. I mean,
I think that's a ton of where it comes from, right? And similarly, like men are historically valued in marriage, setting in marriage questions, not by necessarily what they look like, but by or even how old they are sometimes, or like, but by what they have. I mean, in another society, it would be their wealth or their birth. And here that's neatly linked to your occupation. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably where it comes from. I don't know that there's anything intrinsic about it, but I do think that it still has a lot of truth as a social pattern. I mean, and even among like, I won't challenge your claim that you're not competitive, but it does, the way that you and your friends who get along very well and are very sincere and very, kind and not at all Machiavellian, it just does have a little bit of a different sense. It feels like the system of weights and measures is different than it is among men. I mean, I think the one thing, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I just have to say one important thing that Alexis's nails look really good. I mean, it's just like I've been really like sitting on this comment for a long time. And if I were Mary Gateskill, I would steal your nail polish because they look so I wouldn't
It's
actually,
that
Alexis.
good.
No, they look really good. You know what I would do? What I would do is I would be like, Alexis, can we just be BFFs and like, can you paint my nails? Like that's what I would actually do.
Yes, except there's no way I could have done this myself. I had someone else do it.
Look
But Matthew,
good.
what do you think? Because you didn't say anything, and I think that's a cancelable offense.
I think they
Oh,
look
they look good.
nice.
They look
Yeah.
so good. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Everybody looks nice, I think.
But Matthew, don't you think that like don't you think there is a distinction? I mean, again, we could argue and maybe there is some other version of competitive that's less but I do think that like the ambitious competitive thing is a kind of distinction. I can't imagine being really I mean, well, there's several things that perplex me. Like it really did perplex me. Like the stealing of the clothes. Now, granted, she was a child, she was a teenager. People
Hmm.
do weird stuff when they're teenagers. But I still think back and I think like my like very, very, very best friend, would I just like take stuff that I knew was really important to that person and then be sort of surprised when it was still a big deal to them when they,
So,
like
but you do think that was the big deal?
well, I mean, I think it sounds small, but I think like those clothes were clearly important to her. And then if you go back and read it, it's not like she took them and immediately gave them back. It's like she took a number. It sounds like she
Yeah.
stuffed her bag with like a lot of them and kept it. And then her mom found it. So I think that was strange. And then I also found it strange that, I mean, it's again, it's something where it's like she's such a good writer and she's so convincing when you're kind of holding her narrative, hand as a narrator. But like when they ran into each other again,
Yeah. So
and
this
when
is the coda. There's like an
it's the
important last note
coda,
of this story.
yeah. And I think when she gets this like,
Would you narrate it or give us a little bit of it?
yeah, so as adults, they cross, now this is where I may not remember it thoroughly, so y'all correct me. As adults, they cross paths twice again. And once was when like maybe she was in college and Sandrine was in grad school, and like Sandrine walks into a coffee shop and they like talked and they went to lunch, and then like Mary Gateskill was more eager, but then maybe Sandrine didn't return her phone call afterwards, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the second time was when Mary Gateskill was kind of like established and successful and on her third book. And Sandrine's husband came and delivered a letter at
Came to a reading. Yeah.
the reading. And it was like a pretty like heartfelt letter. And it was like pretty honest. And then Mary Gateskill, did she write
Here,
back?
I was going to say, I was going to just read the section where she describes a little bit of what Sandrine says. She says, to my surprise, this is Mary Gateskill speaking, I was described as a formidable character, graced with a cruelly dead-on wit, while she, in a wild example of distorted self-image, depicted herself as a vision of unwitting, kitschy pathos. The letter then transitioned to a first-person narrative that flashed forward and relayed her astonishment at hearing that I was a published writer, which she wryly contrasted with her own career writing ad copy. She intimated that on reading my first book, she'd been jealous and even disappointed to discover that she really liked it. Then she made a joke that I could not help taking seriously. She said she sometimes felt that I'd stolen her literary talent coupons.
And then she talks about how weird it was when she realized her things were missing.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. Yeah, it must have been really
realized
hurt. Yeah.
she'd taken them.
But
Wow.
you do think, to clarify, like, yeah, I wasn't suggesting that stealing the clothes was not a big deal, but you do think that it was the stealing of the clothes that Sandrine was responding to when she chewed out her friend on getting back and looking like a hippie. Like that, what she was really saying was, "You stole my clothes." You think that's
No,
what?
I don't. I mean, I don't think she was really saying anything. I think it was the sum total of betrayal of the person that she thought she was. Like both what Alexis was saying about her being this kind of like more authentic and like an authentic person with whom she has this sincere, trusting relationship. And so now it's like this whole picture of betrayal where not only is she kind of more superficial and like everyone else interested in clothes, but also that she did this thing that was like out and out. I mean, and again, I think like when you're a teenager, especially, it's like there that it's a very, I mean, I think the gravity of that would be even more grave when you were a teenager. Like I think it was just like a
Yeah,
betrayal
yeah, yeah.
she thought she was.
But what's so interesting to me though is that it's that big a deal. Like the clothes thing, how old were they? They were like what? Like early teens?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, yeah,
And
first year of
both
high school,
times
maybe.
they've yeah, and both times they've met up as adults, they've really focused on that clothes thing.
Yeah.
And it seemed as if, they really did have such a deep, sincere friendship. And I could see, being really betrayed or hurt or something if a friend did that to me. And like definitely when it happened, I would be crushed or angry or whatever. But to continue well into adulthood to talk about that to the point where Mary doesn't even, so at the end when
And this is what
Sandrine's,
really shocked me. Like the final turn of the story was really like kind of broke my
yeah,
heart. Yeah.
yeah, me too. Like when Sandrine's husband brings the letter, to Mary, the really heartfelt letter, Mary responds, doesn't she? She
Yeah.
responds, says,
It says
she,
Sandrine ended the letter with a handwritten note saying that she loved my work and related to it. She asked about my family. She gave me her phone number and address. She plainly wanted to reconnect. I wrote back to her. I don't remember what I said. I'm pretty sure that I apologized again for the theft. I hope I told her how important our friendship had been to me. I hope I told her that I loved her. But whatever I wrote, I didn't give her my phone number or even put my return address on the envelope.
Yeah.
Ironically, her expression of envy had scared me.
Yeah.
She cuts her off.
That's the part that's yeah.
What? How? Yeah. What did you make of that?
I agree with you that it's heartbreaking, but I don't know. It also made me think that maybe, and I know people kind of talk about their inner child or whatever, but between these two, mostly on Mary, for whatever reason, this, envy or whatever she felt about Sandrine is something that, to an extent, she might still have. There's
Yeah.
still some weird, in my opinion, weird baggage or like really intense something there. Because for whatever reason, she just can't, like, I couldn't believe she didn't reach out or
Yeah.
leave
Right,
a
right,
number or
right. No,
anything.
that's what. Yeah, it's shocking. Do
Yeah.
you think though that it was that it? So what Gateskill says is that it was Sandrine's sudden envy for her that was so unnerving. Do you think it was in fact Gateskill's ongoing envy of Sandrine and her beauty and her elegance, and even like reflected in her like elegant, attractive husband? That she could almost like, even though she didn't see Sandrine face to face, she saw evidence of her kind of continuing on in her character in him. But do you think it was more like, oh, this glamorous friend I don't want to be around? Because it does seem like that probably that has diminishing returns over time, I would think.
I don't think it's that simple. I mean, this is what I get to where it makes me wonder about something about how she approaches friendships where they are charged with this kind of thread of envy and competitiveness, where it's like she is insightful enough for it to make her uncomfortable now as an adult, but
Mhm.
it's like this element that she's very attuned to and very quick to shy away from and be really ugh. And I just think like that's the part where like it doesn't, and again like I am ambitious, I want to do things, I want to check, but I like this kind of expecting this charge to be present in my friendships. It's not
Mhm.
something that I go in expecting, and it's not something that I think that Alexis is right. If someone sort of said, "Oh, this happened when we were young," this I don't know. I wonder if the strong response has something to do with still how she. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're onto something, and it makes me think about how toward the beginning of our convo, you said something about how just acknowledging the jealousy or the envy kind of diffuses it. You know,
yeah,
yeah, if these two friends were or had been at some point envious of each other, so I mean, I
yes.
get, yeah, right? Just put it all out there and then form an adult friendship.
It's
I
so
don't,
that's
yeah.
exactly well, it's like what you did. That maybe you've now identified that like that's part of what's so strange. Like I think in many other scenarios, they would laughingly be like, oh, guy, you were so cool when we were teenagers. I was so envious of all your clothes and I wanted cool outfits like that. And then it's like they're laughing and drinking rosé at the like bougie neighborhood, whatever. It's like it's very strange that it still has this kind of like prickly, delicate something. And I think it makes it all the more strange than when you go back to the very beginning and I'm like, golly, what kind of unreliable narrator is Mary Gateskill about her own life, where the whole intro was like, oh, I thought it was so strange that I never had an Elena Ferrante charged French. I just am not a competitive person. I just have no, I'm like, what, like what? I almost want to have like another essay like this that's like Mary Gateskill, because I like you, Mary Gateskill. Please be my friend. Be my friend. I'm very disarming. You won't be envious of me. Like, I want to kind of hear how she like what are her successful friendships like what is the nature of them, like how do they work, because this feels very different to me.
Mm-hmm.
The only friendships I've had that feel as if they flirt with this are a couple of times I have been friends with people, with men. I mean, boy, in one case, you know, a young boy when I was a kid, who only later they were like funny, lively, colorful, lots of you know, good conversation, and it was only later that I discovered they were obsessive pathological liars, that they had told me like elaborate lies and unnecessary lies, and sometimes lies that were you know, contrived to bring us closer, sometimes lies that were contrived to push me away from other people, but that it was in a way part of what was so disturbing about those cases was not just that I had been lied to, but that the lies had been in service of something. Like, in a way, like I was already friends with them. Like I was all like, we were friends. I didn't need to have a lie told to me, but that was sort of in the works, suggested to me that like, oh God, I like, now that you want this in a way that compels you to lie like this, I don't know what, like, I know I feel weird about whatever this friendship is.
You did have a couple weird pathological liar friends, didn't you, Matthew?
Yeah. I mean, one when I was like a little kid, when I was like 7, it was really just like really strange. It was like basically like a year-long friendship. And then at the end of the year, he told me he came to a birthday party and he pulled me aside from the other kids at the party. And he said he'd overheard my parents talking about how they didn't really want me.
What?
And I was so upset. I like, you know, like cried, and I was a big crybaby then. And I like cried and like
Oh,
went into the house. My dad was like, what are you talking about? That never happened. He's just lying. He's like, he's probably just telling you a bunch of lies. And I was like, oh, do you think that big elaborate machine that he has in his house, where his whole house transforms into the Legend of Zelda when he goes into the closet and pulls a lever, do you think that might not be true either? Like, do you think that when I go over to his house and it doesn't, and it's not there, it's not just because it's broken that weekend? Do you think
I mean,
maybe like
you were maybe pathologically gullible.
I've said this before. I am extremely gullible. If you tell me something in words, I believe the words.
You know, I have a friend who is also a pathological liar, and for some reason, though, I always thought I was exempt. I always thought, you know, she lies to everybody around her except me because I'm her best friend. And I mentioned it to another one of my best friends, and she said, no, Alexis, like pathological liars, they don't pick and choose.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. Well,
pathological. They're lying to everybody.
no, I mean, I've not had a pathological liar friend, but I will say a friend that Matthew and I had, and there are lots of complicated reasons for this, but this was a friend who constantly was having, now this is so obvious to me, like in my life, in my daily life, this friend had like was constantly blowing up relationships, and she was constantly coming to Matthew and me being like
being betrayed by her friends.
Being betrayed, like I can't stand that. Can you believe this person did this? They're like dead to me. And I remember just thinking like, wow, golly, you know, like completely not missing the common denominator was this person. And sort of like never occurring to me that like, sure enough, eventually Matthew and I would be the people who had to be like, but it was just like it was a constant saga, and we were always hearing. And I remember thinking like, wow, that person turned out to be horrible to you too. And it was just like dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
We gotta do our closing thoughts because I'm getting towards my East Coast bedtime.
I think honestly, this is an essay that we could talk about forever. And I also think that like maybe by the time I'm older, I'll look back and have a different interpretation or reaction than I'm having right now. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, this makes me think about how, do you know the actor Michael B. Jordan from Black Panther? Did you see that interview where he's being interviewed by his middle school bully on the red carpet? He
No.
runs into this woman and she says something and she's like, "Oh, I know you." And he goes, "Yeah, you used to call me the corny kid." And he's visibly unhappy. He's not making a joke. He's visibly uncomfortable. He won't look at her.
Wow.
And that makes me think just in general about maybe no matter how old or how successful we get, there's always going to be some of that still in us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I want to throw out to the universe. We do know someone who is friends with the amazing legend, gift of literature, fascinating, clearly fascinating childhood Mary Gateskill. Mary Gateskill, if you want to come on SLEERICKETS, like we can all reconvene and we can invite Mary Gateskill and she can
Yes.
like elucidate all of this and tell us how we're wrong. And yeah, I mean, so Mary Gateskill, you know, come along and come and be our friend. Come and let us befriend you. So I think the nice thing is she doesn't need to shy away. I think like this is a crowd. We are a crowd of admirers, non-enviers. We do not envy you, Mary Gateskill. It's all just like admiration. Like
Yeah.
Yes.
We won't steal from you.
nothing, no tickets, no clothes.
But we have things worth stealing. How about that? We got to, yeah, we have to like, we need some bait as well.
Like bejeweled gowns with
Thigh-high boots.
yes, fake hair.
I wonder a little bit, just because I am generally somebody who has very little interest in memoir, but I did find this pretty fascinating, and I wonder if it's not in part like because the other old cliche about men and women is that I think again has some truth to it, at least for sociological reasons, if not innate, is that women care about relationships and men care about ideas or things. And it occurs to me that she may have been pretty clever in how she constructed this, because of course it's a relationship story, but it's framed as an idea story. So it's almost like the action movie that has like the romantic element to appeal to the girlfriends of the guys dragging their wives to the show. Like it's not their girlfriends if they have wives.
Well,
Yeah, or both. Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah. There's what was the tagline for Soderbergh's The Girlfriend Experience was see it with someone you fuck. So it's like, yeah, you need to target the movie not to families, but to mistresses. And yeah, this is a good article to read with your wife or your mistress, I would say,
Or both, if you really want to take
or
a
your,
risk.
or your frenemy.
Which, to clarify, is not what is happening right now. just to lay that out, very clearly. Not what is happening now. This is just about the 2-year anniversary of Out of Order, you said, Alexis?
It is the day. It's my second
today's the day?
Out of Order. Yeah, March 29th.
Yeah. So go. Yeah. If you have not read Out of Order, go buy a copy. I will definitely put a link in the show notes. And not yet available, but soon available, particularly when this comes out, is Joanna, your book, Bright and Tender Dark, which is, among other things,
June 4th.
June 4th, which is a novel, in part at least, about a female friendship with an element of envy in it.
Oh my God,
it depends on how you frame it, but like,
100%.
The main character and then the kind of the signal iconic character in the story are college roommates, one of whom is very beautiful and glamorous and seems to do things effortlessly.
It's totally Mary Gateskill, please. It's probably too late now. Mary Gateskill, please slurp my paperback. Please slurp, please love it. And it's totally yeah, you're right. It is actually that. How did that not occur to me? It's rife with female.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, stitched all throughout it. Lots of juicy female drama, as well as murder, mystery, violence, craziness, and some ideas thrown in too. So
let's de-emphasize the murder mystery, because I've learned that the real genre heads are brutal if you defy convention. So they're like so pissed off that I'm not, Mary Higgins Clark. So let's call it literary fiction with a murder in it.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
And if you feel as if confident that once you do buy and read the book, you will have a 5-star impression of it, go ahead and go to Goodreads and put a 5-star review on there for and put one on Out of Order as well.
Too.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was Alexis Sears, author of Out of Order, and Joanna Pearson, author of Too Many Books to Count, including the forthcoming Bright and Tender Dark. You can reach me, as always, at SLEERICKETS@gmail.com. And now here is a preview of the latest from The Secret Show. This is a conversation I had with Jonathan Farmer. It's sort of the continuation of our discussion of Lucille Clifton's poems. Sure, but like with the Hips poem, granted, I am 100% not the target audience for that poem, but like I absolutely feel that poem's designs upon me.
Okay.
Whereas with the Lost Baby poem, like, no, that what I hear is a pure lyric. And in the process of doing that, it may be that other things happen. I don't mean pure lyric as in like, if we tested it, like William Logan, we would get, it would come back 98%. What I mean is that I don't feel it I don't feel its designs, I don't feel it trying to do anything other than be a true version of itself. And in the process, like what is certainly true is that it is possible to make a piece of art and then have it have a political effect that is not cooked into the intention there, or the palpable intention at least. But that is a little bit different, I think.
Yeah. I think it's a difference of degree rather than kind, though.
I don't know if it is, though. I mean, because I think like there's
not difference in the kind of poem, but difference in the kind of politics.
Okay, but tell me, what are the different kinds of politics?
I think both of those are poems that, along with other things in one case and fewer things in the other, are concerned with validating kinds of being, kinds of experience that would have been treated as unpoetic, unbeautiful, improper at the time she wrote them. And I think that was a deep motivation for her in writing poems. And I think in one poem it manifests in ways that are more constrained to my ear by that impulse, and in one way, another it manifests in ways that feel unconstrained by that.
Yeah.
But I see them as having a real kinship.
Right. I mean, so there are a couple things, like here's a couple things I'm not saying that I think sometimes people do say, and that are like, it's worth making a distinction.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm not saying is that there are certain things that are suitable for poetry to
Sure.
be about, and other things that it's not suitable for people to, and why do we have to have all these poems about race? Why do we have to have all these poems about this? Like, no, that's a silly question, because anything that humans can experience, poems can be about. And certainly politics concerns things that people can experience. So yes. But like a test, I will say, like it's not the only test, but like a meaningful test, perhaps, of whether or not what you are concerned with is the conveyance of a lyric experience, of an emotionally, the lyric, communication of an experience versus the achievement of a political agenda, is whether or not there's any contradictory evidence, right? Like if you are writing a poem and the point of that poem is to make sure that people think abortion is bad and wrong, then you're not going to include things in your poem that suggest that, like, oh, maybe actually there's some value to abortion, right? If your goal is to communicate that, hey, let's be proud of this kind of body and it's good, and like actually let's celebrate this kind of body, then you're not going to include anything that suggests in there that like, oh, there's actually some contradiction, or there's some self-loathing, or there's some hang up, or there's some drawback. Like, you're not going to include any suggestion that there's a complication to that message. Homage to My Hips is 100% uncomplicated. The Lost Baby poem is deeply complicated. And in fact, if we were to identify a political agenda, that might actually be the opposite of the actual desire on the part of the poet. It's just that what she seems most committed to is a lyric conveyance of an experience. So to me, like that is somewhat indicative of the difference. I would also say that, like, it's not that poems can't be about anything. It's not that poems are incapable of causing political change. It's just that the way poems tend to work is on individuals, stirring individual feelings. And politics.
Let me jump in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff. So I'm a little worried of going too far with this, because I think we're having a larger argument than we are having a disagreement. Like, I think our disagreement is really small. The argument is getting kind of large. To the extent that the Lost Baby poem is a political poem, I don't think it's a political poem about the politics of abortion.
No, definitely not.
Right.
But I'm saying, like, that it could even be read that way is a testament to its lyric honesty, I would say. That it could be read in a way that is contradictory to the presumed politics of the author.
Yeah, I mean, sure. But I think the political impulse behind both poems, for all their differences, and I completely agree with you about their differences in terms of complication, all this thing, is that I think both of them, it's easy for me to imagine both of them being rooted in a desire to treat as worthy of poetry things and people that would have been presumed to be unworthy of poetry.
Sure.
So, and the one thing I would say is I disagree a little bit, and again, like, I don't want to exaggerate the disagreement, but I disagree with a little bit with your idea that the effect of poems is necessarily one person at a time. I think that depends on the particular poetic culture and poetic situation.
Yeah, there are more public poems and presentations than others. That's true.
Right. And with those more public poems, we don't have a ton of those in the US right now, and haven't for a while, but there really were big rooms where part of what made the experience of the poem, was kind of like being in a theater with a bunch of other people watching a play. It was being part of this collective experience, this shared emotional and in some cases political experience of hearing this thing together.
To hear the rest of that conversation, go to SLEERICKETS.substack.com and sign up for The Secret Show. It is pretty fucking cheap. And if you'd like to test it out, you can put your email address in the slot, and I'll give you a week's access for free, so you can see what it is all about. Thanks for listening. I will talk to you soon. Bye.